Humanity had long believed itself alone in the universe until the day the sky burned with the arrival of the Vrake war fleets. The attack was swift, brutal, and without warning as cities crumbled beneath orbital bombardments and military installations were reduced to smoldering ruins. The United Earth Defense Forces scrambled to respond, but against the sheer technological superiority of the invaders every countermeasure seemed futile. The Vrake were a warrior race, their empire forged through centuries of conquest. To them humanity was just another species to be crushed, another civilization to be assimilated into their dominion. They had done this 100 times before, and this war was nothing more than routine. But what they did not expect was that humans did not submit. From the ashes of destroyed cities, survivors regrouped and adapted. Earth's militaries, despite suffering catastrophic losses, reorganized and began fighting back with guerrilla tactics. Vrake ground forces found themselves ambushed at every turn, supply lines were sabotaged, and their once secure occupation zones became death traps. The resilience of humanity puzzled them. Species that faced Vrake invasion usually surrendered within weeks, but humans fought with a desperation that bordered on madness. The war escalated as Earth's remaining forces launched counteroffensives. Advanced Vrake energy weapons and shields clashed against human ingenuity as soldiers modified conventional weapons to pierce enemy armor. Civilian scientists reverse-engineered captured enemy tech in underground bunkers, pushing the boundaries of innovation at breakneck speeds. Humanity was evolving, adapting, and refusing to die. The Vrake High Command grew frustrated. This was supposed to be an easy conquest, yet they were losing more troops than expected. They increased their forces, deploying their most elite warriors and orbital siege weapons. Cities were razed, entire continents left in ruins, yet humans still refused to surrender. The real turning point came when the human fleet made its first strike against a Vrake warship. A group of engineers had discovered a weakness in their energy shielding, and a coordinated attack by Earth's few remaining space vessels managed to destroy a Vrake battleship. It was a small victory in the grand scheme of war, but it sent shockwaves through the Vrake ranks. No species had ever taken down one of their capital ships so early in a war. With renewed confidence, humanity began fighting even harder. Underground resistance movements spread across occupied territories, feeding valuable intelligence to the military. Vrake soldiers became increasingly paranoid as entire battalions went missing in the night. The more they tightened their grip, the more humanity slipped through their fingers. But the war was far from over. The Vrake Empire had infinite resources, and their reinforcements were already on the way. Humanity had won battles, but the war still loomed over them. They needed something more, something that would turn the tide permanently. As Earth's leaders gathered in hidden command centers discussing their next move, one thing became clear. Survival was not enough. Humanity had to win. And to win they had to do the impossible. They had to take the fight beyond Earth. The arrival of the Vrake reinforcements signaled the darkest hour for humanity. Orbital fleets covered the sky like a swarm of locusts, their weapons carving fresh scars into the already devastated planet. Entire cities disappeared in pillars of fire as the Vrake sought to end the resistance once and for all. Humanity had proven to be far more troublesome than expected, so the invaders escalated their campaign to total planetary domination. But humanity had been preparing. In the hidden depths of underground bunkers, military command centers, and secret research facilities, a plan had been taking shape. The war could not be won by defending Earth alone. Humanity had to break free from its homeworld and strike at the heart of the Vrake Empire itself. A desperate exodus began. Fleets of hastily retrofitted ships powered by reverse-engineered Vrake technology launched from hidden bases. Most of these ships had never been tested in actual combat, but there was no time for hesitation. Humanity had one chance to get off Earth before it became a graveyard. Vrake patrols detected the escaping fleets and immediately moved to intercept. Dogfights erupted in orbit, human pilots dodging and weaving through superior enemy craft, relying on sheer willpower and unpredictable tactics. They used debris fields as cover, turned civilian vessels into makeshift missile platforms, and lured Vrake ships into ambushes. The cost was brutal, but for every ship that fell, another slipped past the blockade, breaking through to the stars. Among them was the Exodus fleet, a collection of warships, freighters and stolen enemy vessels carrying the last hope of humanity. Their destination was uncharted space anywhere beyond the reach of the Vrake. But a select group of ships had another mission entirely. Deep within an asteroid field orbiting Jupiter, a hidden research facility had been working on a secret project. A stolen Vrake warp drive, heavily modified with human ingenuity, was now operational. It was unstable, unpredictable and extremely dangerous, but if it worked it could be humanity's ticket to striking back. The facility barely had time to transmit the final launch codes before Vrake ships descended upon it, wiping it from existence. But the knowledge had been passed on. Humanity's first war fleet now had a weapon that could take them beyond the enemy's reach and possibly into the heart of their empire. The surviving human forces regrouped beyond the solar system, battered but not broken. The war for Earth was over and humanity had lost its home. But the war for survival had only just begun. The remnants of humanity drifted through the cold void of space, their ships battle-scarred and their people weary. The Exodus fleet, a fragile collection of warships, freighters and stolen Vrake craft, carried the last hope of their species. Earth was gone, occupied by an enemy that had underestimated them once but would never make that mistake again. The only path forward was vengeance. Scouts had been dispatched to gather intelligence on the Vrake Empire. What they discovered was both horrifying and promising. The Vrake had conquered hundreds of worlds, enslaving countless species, but their empire was vast and spread thin. They had never faced an enemy that fought as humans did, with an unbreakable will and an ability to adapt at a terrifying speed. There were cracks in the foundation of their dominion and humanity would drive a blade into them. The first strike had to count. The fleet needed resources, weapons, and a true foothold. Their first target was a Vrake supply outpost on the fringes of their territory, a seemingly minor installation but a vital node in their logistical network. If humanity could capture it, they would have the means to start striking deeper into enemy space. The attack was swift, brutal, and entirely unexpected. The Vrake garrison had grown complacent, believing their empire unchallenged. They had no concept of what it meant to fight an enemy that had already lost everything. Human strike teams infiltrated the outpost, disabling key defenses before the fleet rained destruction from above. The entire station was seized in a matter of hours, its defenders slaughtered or captured. It was humanity's first true victory in space, and it sent a message. They were not broken. They were not fleeing. They were coming back with a vengeance. With access to enemy supplies and technology, the fleet began its transformation. Captured Vrake weapons were integrated into human ships, defenses were reinforced and new strategies were devised. Every battle provided more knowledge, every skirmish made them stronger. But humanity was still a fraction of what it once was, and the Vrake were an empire spanning the stars. The next move had to be bolder. The fleet needed allies. Scattered across Vrake space were other conquered species, broken civilizations forced into servitude. They had accepted their fate, believing no one could stand against the Empire. Humanity would show them otherwise. The fleet set its sights on a world known as Vashkiri, home to a once proud warrior race now reduced to laboring under Vrake rule. If the humans could free them, they might gain not just an army but the beginnings of a true rebellion. The war was no longer about survival. It was about retribution. The fleet moved through the darkness of space, silent and unseen. Vashkiri lay ahead, a world once belonging to the mighty Kyrian people, now a slave planet under the Vrake. If humanity was to stand a chance, they needed warriors, and no species had a greater reputation for combat than the Kyrians. But the once proud fighters had been broken, shackled by the Empire's relentless cruelty. The mission was clear. Liberate the Kyrians, ignite a rebellion, and turn the Vrake's own subjects against them. Scouts had already infiltrated the surface, moving through the vast prison complexes and forced labor camps where the Kyrians toiled. The reports were grim. Entire generations had been raised under Vrake oppression, their warrior traditions erased, their will to fight nearly extinguished. Some Kyrian elders still whispered of their old ways, but most had resigned themselves to servitude. The humans would change that. The fleet struck under the cover of night, descending upon the Vrake security forces like a phantom. Explosions tore through key installations as human strike teams overran prison facilities, cutting down Vrake guards and freeing the captives within. Confused and wary, the Kyrians hesitated, watching these strange new warriors fight with a level of ferocity they had never seen before. Then came the moment that changed everything. A group of Kyrian elders witnessing the battle saw something in humanity that had long been lost in their own people. Defiance. Resilience. The will to fight even in the face of certain death. One by one they took up weapons left behind by their captors and joined the fray. By dawn the planet was in chaos. Human commandos had sabotaged communication networks, leaving Vrake reinforcements scrambling to understand what was happening. The Kyrians, once too broken to resist, now stood beside their liberators, their blood boiling with a fury they had thought lost to history. The battle raged for days. The Vrake sent wave after wave of forces to crush the rebellion, but for the first time they faced a united front of humans and Kyrians fighting together. Guerrilla tactics, ambushes, and sheer reckless determination overwhelmed the invaders. The Vrake were pushed back, forced to retreat from a world they had ruled for centuries. Vashkiri was free, and the news spread across the empire like wildfire. The impossible had happened. A species had not only defied the Vrake but had won. The Kyrians swore allegiance to humanity not out of gratitude but out of something far deeper. They had found purpose again, and in humanity they saw the same fire that had once defined them. With new allies, new weapons, and a growing legend, humanity was no longer just a scattered fleet in the void. They were an uprising. The fires of rebellion had been lit, and they spread faster than the Vrake could extinguish them. Word of Vashkiri's liberation rippled across the empire, reaching the ears of countless enslaved species. The Vrake had built their dominion on fear and the belief that resistance was futile, but humanity had shattered that illusion. Now the oppressed had something they had not dared to dream of for generations. Hope. The Exodus fleet no longer wandered without purpose. It was now the spearhead of an uprising. The Kyrians had joined them, bringing warriors who had once been the terror of the battlefield, now eager to reclaim their lost honor. But an army without a supply chain was doomed to fail. If humanity was to continue this war, they needed more than soldiers. They needed infrastructure. Their next target was a Vrake industrial world known as Tavaxis Prime, a massive orbital shipyard and weapons manufacturing hub. If they could take it, they would not only cripple the Vrake war effort but also gain the means to build a fleet capable of true war. But this would not be a lightning strike like Vashkiri. This would be a siege. Humanity's forces had grown, but they were still outnumbered. A direct assault would be suicide, so they opted for deception. The fleet split into multiple groups, launching diversionary attacks across the sector, drawing Vrake defenses away from Tavaxis Prime. When the bulk of enemy forces had been lured away, the main strike force moved in. Kyrian warriors led the ground assault, landing on key factory zones, while human commandos infiltrated the shipyards, hacking security systems and disabling defensive turrets. The battle quickly spiraled into chaos. Vrake soldiers fought viciously, but the humans and Kyrians had learned from each engagement, adapting to enemy tactics at a frightening pace. The Vrake commanders, realizing they were losing, attempted to scuttle the shipyards to prevent them from falling into enemy hands. Humanity's hackers worked furiously, racing against time to override the detonation sequences. They succeeded with seconds to spare, saving the massive foundries from destruction. Tavaxis Prime belonged to humanity. With control of the shipyards, humanity was no longer just a scattered rebellion. They had the means to mass-produce warships, retrofit captured enemy vessels, and stockpile advanced weaponry. The first human-built capital ship forged in the fires of war was christened the UNS Defiance, a symbol of their unbreakable will. But the victory came at a cost. The Vrake Empire was enraged. What had once been a nuisance had now become a true threat. Their response would be absolute. Humanity had won the battle. Now they had to prepare for the storm that was coming. The victory at Tavaxis Prime sent shockwaves through the Vrake Empire, and it didn't take long for their response to come. The Vrake High Command, enraged by the loss of such a vital world, vowed to obliterate humanity and its allies. Their forces were vast, but now they faced a foe that had not only survived but had begun to thrive. Humanity had forged a fleet capable of holding its own and had allies who were more than willing to fight for their freedom. The war had taken on a new phase. No longer were the humans hiding in the shadows. They were engaging in full-scale battles, pushing deeper into Vrake-controlled territory. With each victory, their reputation grew, and more oppressed species rallied to their cause. Yet the Vrake, for all their arrogance, were not without resources. They had vast fleets and had begun to mobilize their most powerful weapons, determined to crush humanity once and for all. As the humans moved closer to the Vrake capital, a terrible realization struck. The Empire had begun to assemble a weapon that could end the war in an instant, a massive, planet-killing superweapon known as the Reaper. It was unlike anything humanity had encountered. This weapon could reduce an entire planet to dust, and the Vrake were preparing to use it to annihilate the human resistance in one decisive blow. Time was running out. Humanity needed to strike first or face extinction. The fleet gathered for one final assault, an all-out assault on the Vrake capital, Zaltor. The plan was simple: infiltrate the core of the Empire's military might, destroy the Reaper before it could be deployed, and cripple their ability to retaliate. But the Vrake were expecting them. Every Vrake ship, every war machine, was arrayed in defense of their last-ditch weapon. The battle was fierce, with the Exodus fleet engaging in a pitched space battle above Zaltor. The Vrake warships were numerous, and their forces were unmatched in terms of firepower and advanced technology. Yet, humanity's tactics were unpredictable, ruthless, and innovative. Where the Vrake were methodical, the humans fought with an unrelenting determination, using every weapon, every trick they had learned over the years of brutal warfare. Human and Kyrian forces stormed the planet's surface, assaulting the Reaper facility located deep within the heart of the capital. They fought through impossible odds, battling Vrake elite soldiers and elite defense systems. The Reaper was massive, an unholy structure built to deliver the final blow to Earth, but humanity was relentless. They fought not just for victory, but for survival. The battle came to a head when the Reaper's power core was breached. In those final moments, humanity's finest soldiers faced down the Vrake commanders in an epic showdown. The sound of weapons firing echoed across the planet's surface, and as the final countdown to the weapon's activation began, the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. And then, just as the Vrake prepared to launch their apocalyptic strike, humanity delivered the blow that would change everything. A human strike team, aided by Kyrian warriors, infiltrated the heart of the facility and planted explosives deep within the Reaper's core. The explosion that followed was not just the destruction of a weapon, it was the death knell of the Vrake's iron-fisted rule. As the capital fell into chaos and the Vrake High Command scrambled to react, humanity emerged victorious. The Reaper was no more, and the Vrake had lost their greatest weapon. The cost had been high, countless lives had been lost in the final battle, but the victory was undeniable. Humanity had done the impossible. They had struck at the heart of the Vrake Empire and shattered it. The tide of war had turned, but the victory came at a price. The Reaper was destroyed, but the war was far from over. The Vrake would not go quietly. The final confrontation loomed closer, and humanity would have to fight one more time to secure its place in the galaxy. The fall of the Vrake capital, Zaltor, had sent shockwaves through the Empire. The destruction of the Reaper was a blow from which the Vrake would never recover. Their most powerful weapon, the one they had relied on to annihilate humanity, was gone. Yet, despite their losses, the Vrake were far from defeated. They were a proud, warrior race, and they would not yield without a final attempt to reclaim their dominance. As the Exodus fleet regrouped and the rebellion's forces spread across liberated worlds, the reality set in: the Vrake were not finished. They still held the heart of their empire, their fleets still stretched across the stars, and their resolve was unwavering. But humanity had gained something precious: a foothold, an alliance, and the belief that they could win. For the first time since the war began, the humans saw a way forward. But there was one more challenge. The Vrake High Command, in their desperation, had unleashed their final weapon, the Emperor's Wrath. A massive fleet, constructed in secret, equipped with new technologies and superweapons far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. It was a force that could wipe out entire star systems in a single sweep, a force meant to break humanity once and for all. The final battle would take place in the heart of the Vrake Empire, deep within the galactic core. Humanity's fleet, now bolstered by the Kyrians and other freed species, would face off against the full might of the Vrake. The odds were insurmountable. The Vrake had the numbers, the firepower, and the experience. Humanity, on the other hand, had their unshakable spirit, their adaptability, and the will to survive. The two fleets met in the heart of a dying star system. The human ships, now fully equipped with reverse-engineered Vrake technology and bolstered by their newfound allies, engaged in a fierce battle. The Vrake's Emperor's wrath unleashed hell upon them, sending wave after wave of destruction. But the humans did not retreat. They did not falter. Every move in the battle was calculated, every human ship a symbol of defiance. The Kyrians led the charge, their warriors tearing through Vrake lines with unmatched ferocity. Human pilots, fueled by the memory of their lost world and the years of suffering, pushed forward with a courage that shocked even their enemies. As the battle raged on, a small group of human and Kyrian commandos infiltrated the heart of the Vrake flagship, where the Emperor himself resided. A final showdown was inevitable. The Emperor, a towering figure of power and ruthlessness, met the human strike force in a battle that would determine the fate of the galaxy. It was a brutal, desperate fight. The Emperor wielded technology far beyond anything humanity had encountered, but the humans were not just fighting for victory, they were fighting for the future of every free species in the galaxy. In the end, it was the relentless drive of the human soldiers, aided by their Kyrian allies, that overcame the Emperor's might. With a final, devastating blow, the Emperor fell. As the Vrake flagship collapsed around them, the remaining Vrake forces surrendered. The rebellion had done what was once thought impossible, they had defeated the greatest empire the galaxy had ever known. The war was over. The galaxy was free. Humanity stood victorious, but the price had been high. The scars of war ran deep, and the cost of survival had been measured in blood, sacrifice, and the loss of a homeworld. Yet, despite everything, humanity had endured. They had faced an empire that sought to erase them, and they had emerged not just as survivors, but as conquerors. The galaxy had changed. The oppressed species that had once been slaves now stood with humanity, free to chart their own destinies. And as humanity looked to the stars, they knew that their story was far from over. They had faced impossible odds, and in the end, they had proven that no empire, no matter how mighty, could ever crush the human spirit. The future was theirs to shape. And they would shape it with the same defiance, the same fire, that had carried them through the darkest days of the war. Humanity had won. The galaxy was theirs. And they would never forget the price they had paid to claim it.